Hello, hello, hello. How you guys doing? Everybody all right? Everybody okay? I see we've got a couple of hundred people tuned in. Please make sure you've hit the like button. Yada, yada, you know the drill. I mean, I'm always repeating myself in case there are new people. But basically, it helps the channel grow, and it fights the algorithm if we're being suppressed. So there you go. Please, guys, tell me where you're tuning in from. Wonderful. I see almost everybody's hit the like button. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Tell me where you guys are tuning in from, and you know, what city, what state, what country, what county, where you are. I'm just reading the comments, man. It's funny stuff. There we go. Somalia, New York City, Sweden, Slovenia, Los Angeles, Boston, Detroit, Germany, Vancouver, London, Tunisia, Italy, Vienna, Vulcan, London, China, Mexico, Ireland, Quebec, Hawaii, Cyprus, New York, Argentina, Queens, New York, Florida. Florida, unfortunately, says Fred. Virginia, Canada, Germany, Belgravia, Ireland, Italy, Canada, Dallas, Leicestershire, Russia, Algeria, Toronto, Florida. Unfortunately, I already read that. Argentina, Canada, Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. Wonderful. Wonderful. That's great. That's great. And it just keeps on going. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the program. Let me just dive right in, because sometimes we got to ease into the BS. Other times I want to get it over with, you know? It's painful. So I have an explosive story for you, and I hate this and love this, you know? And I'll tell you why I love this, because it basically just proves everything that we've been saying is correct, and it really shows and exposes the you know, the political establishment, especially Democrats. Okay, so this story is, hold on, let me see if you can just give me 1 second. This story is really explosive. It shows you how corrupt the Democrats are, and how they're really no different from Republicans. Okay, so Democrats basically wrote, House progressives, right? Specifically progressives. They wrote a letter to President Biden in June, but it just came out now and caused a huge scandal. Well, what does this letter say? I'll read it to you in a second. They basically asked Biden to pursue diplomacy with Russia to end the war there, right? They said, listen, this situation with Ukraine is extremely volatile. We could have a nuclear catastrophe. It's affecting people's lives worldwide, in the US, in Ukraine, everywhere. This is very bad. We have to pursue diplomacy while also giving the Ukrainians weapons, right? So they're not saying we want to cut off weapons. Of course they wouldn't say that, because progressives support the military-industrial complex, right? But when this letter came out, now they're all embarrassed. Like, in the span of 24 hours, they withdrew the letter. Can you believe this? They withdrew the letter, and I mean, the hypocrisy is just nuts. It's nuts. It's nuts. Okay, let me read the letter to you. Here it is. It was published October 24th, but like I said, they wrote it in June, allegedly, right? So it's addressed to Biden, and this is from the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Okay, so this is people like AOC. It's headed by Pramila Jayapal. You have Ro Khanna, blah, 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 right? So I'll just read you the most important parts. They say, it is imperative to avoid direct military conflict with Russia, which would lead to World War III, something we must strive to prevent. The risk of nuclear weapons being used has been estimated to be higher now than at any time since the height of the Cold War. Given the catastrophic possibilities of nuclear escalation and miscalculation, which only increase the longer this war continues, we agree with your goal of avoiding direct military conflict as an overriding national security priority. Given the destruction created by this war for Ukraine and around the world, as well as the risk of catastrophic escalation, we also believe it is in the interests of Ukraine, the United States, and the world to avoid a prolonged conflict. For this region, we urge you to pair the military and economic support the U.S. has given Ukraine with a proactive diplomatic push. Redoubling efforts to seek a realistic framework for a ceasefire. This is consistent with your recognition, with Biden's recognition, that there's, quote, going to have to be a negotiated settlement here, and your concern that Vladimir Putin, quote, doesn't have a way out right now. And I'm trying to figure out what we do about that. That's what Biden said, okay? Such a framework would presumably include incentives to end hostilities, including some form of sanctions relief and bringing together the international community to establish security guarantees for a free and independent Ukraine that are acceptable for all parties, particularly Ukrainians. The alternative to diplomacy is protracted war, with both its attendant certainties and catastrophic and unknowable risk. And by the way, just so you know, there's 13 million Ukrainians that have been displaced. Okay, 13 million. It's probably higher now. The conflict threatens an additional tens of millions more worldwide as skyrocketing prices in wheat, fertilizer, and fuel spark acute crises in global hunger and poverty. Remember, this is because Russia is a major exporter of fertilizer, Ukraine exports wheat, Russia exports fuel, etc., right? So it affects the whole world, not just that region. The conflict has also contributed to elevated gas and food prices at home, fueling inflation and high oil prices for Americans in recent months. Right? That's what I've been talking about with you guys for months. That this doesn't just affect Russia like they claim. The sanctions, there's blowback at home. So they say that they agree with the administration's perspective that the U.S. shouldn't pressure Ukraine, but its legislators responsible for the expenditure of tens of billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars in military assistance in the conflict. We believe such involvement in this war also creates a responsibility for the U.S. to seriously explore. Okay, I don't know what just happened there. I think I went offline for a second. Listen, I was just saying, and this is signed by Pramila Jayapal, so she's the head of the Caucus, Cory Bush. You know, it's about 30 of them, okay? It's about 30 of them. And the letter comes out, and they're immediately embarrassed. And they put out this statement withdrawing the letter, okay? So, look, it's just one day, October 25th, just the day after. They say the Congressional Progressive Caucus hereby withdraws its recent letter to the White House regarding Ukraine. The letter was drafted several months ago, but unfortunately was released by staff without vetting. As chair of the caucus, I accept responsibility for this because of the timing. Our message is being conflated by some as being equivalent to the recent statement by Republican leader McCarthy threatening an end to aid to Ukraine if Republicans take over. The proximity of these statements created the unfortunate appearance that Democrats, who have strongly and unanimously supported and voted for every package of military, strategic, and economic assistance to the Ukrainian people, are somehow aligned with Republicans who seek to pull the plug on American support for President Zelensky and the Ukrainian forces. Wow. I mean, come on. They think we would conflate them with Republicans? Who would do that? Who would do that? They're nothing alike. So, just to remind you, the last I recall, you had 57 out of 213 House Republicans who voted no on the $40 billion aid package to Ukraine. This is a few months back in May. So, the majority of Republicans overwhelmingly support aid to Ukraine, just like the overwhelming majority of Democrats. But the Democratic Party, because they're in power now, you know, they kind of take the torch from Trump or Bush, and they are now the war party. And then when Republicans get back into power, they'll do the same crap as well. Remember, Trump, he sent 47. How many millions did he send Ukraine back in what is this, 2017? He sent them $47 million worth of weapons. He sent them the javelins, right, which have proven to be very effective. And so Bernie Sanders is also upset by this letter, right? How dare you? Diplomacy is not the answer. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders said Tuesday that the Russian invasion of Ukraine had to be resisted and that the Congressional Progressive Caucus was right to withdraw a letter that urged Biden to negotiate an end to the war with Putin. Quote, I don't agree with that. And they don't agree with it, apparently. Sanders told Semaphore in a phone interview. He said it was withdrawn today, so it becomes a non-issue. And Sanders also dismissed the claim from some candidates and some protesters who have called progressive members of Congress warmongers over their votes to fund Ukraine's counteroffensive. Sanders said, Democrats? Warmongers? When you have Putin breaking all kinds of international laws, unleashing an incredibly disgusting and horrific level of destruction against the people of Ukraine? So Bernie Sanders sounds like the State Department, basically. Okay? Now, are we surprised by this? No. No, of course not. Let me please just show you the figures, because when I show you the numbers, your heads are going to fucking explode. Okay? Let's see how much money has been given to Ukraine so far. This is from NBC News. It's the latest I have, okay? So, up until now, Congress has allocated $65 billion in funding to Ukraine since February. The new aid package, there's another one coming, which would most likely be part of an omnibus spending bill, could be within the range of roughly $50 billion. $50 billion. $65 billion wasn't enough. They got to add $50 billion in there. Keep in mind, Israel has received $38 billion in its 10-year package. Okay, so it's $3.8 billion each year, but in total, over 10 years, it's $38 billion. This year, the U.S. has given Ukraine more money than it has given Israel in the last 10 years. I bet they're quite jealous right now. And they want to double it, basically, almost double it, right? 65 billion plus 50 billion. Man, people in the U.S. don't even get that money. If you asked for 65 or 50 billion, right, in help for, I don't know, paying off student loan debts, right? Or let's say for healthcare. For healthcare. This is basic right that every so-called industrialized country has. They would tell you to fuck off. They would tell you to go and screw yourself. If you, an American citizen, you asked for 50 billion just for healthcare, just so people can have healthcare, they would say, screw you, go to hell. Remember Biden? Biden said he was going to give people $10,000 to pay off federal loan debts, and he canceled that. Even this $10,000, he withdrew it. $10,000. That's nothing. That's a drop in the ocean compared to 50 billion. And then you remember when he took power, they had these like checks that they were giving people. They said, no. We promised you 2,000, but Trump gave you 600 just a few months ago. So, technically we just owe you 1,400. Like they're trying to scam people out of $600 fucking dollars. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even American, and I'm fuming. I'm fuming at this. This is so outrageous. Like, they just piss money away for weapons, for not even to defend the U.S. It's other countries, and they're using Ukraine to mess with Russia. So it's not even necessary. The whole war could have been avoided with diplomacy, right? It didn't need to happen. And then they give you crumbs. They give people nothing. They always have excuses for weapons and for war, but everything else, screw you, go to hell. No, nothing. It's not even in the discussion. Who's even talking about this? Is anyone talking about this? No, it's not even brought up. It's not even a thing. It's gone. Now, let me show you the reactions from this is, look, Glenn put together a couple of tweets from Matt Duss. Matt Duss is Bernie Sanders' foreign policy advisor, okay? And I want to show you, just like the Caucus itself, in the span of 24 hours, he flip-flops. First, he says, the letter is great. And then, 24 hours later, when Bernie and Jayapal have ditched the letter and walked it back, he's like, no, this is that thing. No. That's what the bad timing. Diplomacy is good in spring, but in autumn, it's kind of out, right? It's not in fashion in fall. You need some more weapons in fall. Right? Diplomacy, they don't mix together, okay? Like, there's a bad time for diplomacy. Okay, here's what he said. Here's Matt Duss. Okay, he said, this is a good letter, right? The letter that I just read to you, that they sent to Biden. Matt Duss says, this is a good letter. It backs the administration's continuing support for Ukraine. It urges more aggressive U.S. diplomatic effort to identify possible ceasefire options while making clear that no agreement will be made without Ukraine. Here's another one. Quote, so he was responding to someone criticizing the letter, right? He said that what the letter actually says is that, quote, we agree with the administration's perspective that it is not America's place to pressure Ukraine's government regarding sovereign decision. Okay, and he's like telling this a person called Tom Watson, consider reading it next time. Right? So remember, this is October 24th. Let's go to October 25th, right? So this is a couple of hours ago. The same guy, Matt Dust, says, my assessment of the letter's contents isn't as harsh as some, but there's no question that the timing and lack of consideration here were disastrous, right? The folks who precipitously pushed the letter out have done real damage to the progressive foreign policy project. No, man. You, AOC, Bernie Sanders, have done extreme damage and great damage to progressive, quote-unquote, foreign policy. I don't know if you ever even have one, because all I see is progressives giving weapons to Israel, giving weapons to Ukraine to screw with Russia, like poking a bear that has more nuclear weapons than you. That's very sound foreign policy. You're a fucking ambassador. You are. Well done. Let me show you Ilhan Omar. Okay. So she said that timing is everything in public policy. Letters are written to respond to a moment, and in politics, moments pass in the speed of light. In this particular case, the letter was a response to intelligence we were getting on the war and the pathway forward. Once in a while, they do release letters preemptively. Not preemptively, but too late. And she said this is very frustrating. Once you sign on to a letter, it's up to the original drafters, and unfortunately, not all of them will keep folks updated. That is why some of us don't sign on to letters without direct insight into when or how it will be released. So do you see what's going on? They're using this excuse that, oh, well, we wrote this in June and it was only released yesterday and it doesn't fit what's going on in the war. You know, like we were okay with diplomacy in June, but now we're not okay with diplomacy because of the things that are happening. What things exactly? Like I'm struggling to understand what happened. The Russian diplomatic corps has been wiped out in a missile strike. What happened? Why is it not a good idea? It's even more important to do it now because Biden himself, your president, and who's also a Democrat, is saying that we're closer to nuclear war than ever before. They even wrote that in the letter. They put that in the letter, and it's true. You know, the Crimea bridge has been blown up since they wrote this letter. The Nord Stream pipelines were blown up since they wrote this letter. What the fuck are they waiting for? Are they waiting for the apocalypse to publish a letter after that? When is a good time? When there's a nuclear winter, is that a good time for you? I'm offended and fucking fuming that these incompetent morons are the ones that are fueling this war, that are signing the checks to screw with Russia and use the Ukrainian people to screw with Russia while they sit comfortably in Capitol Hill. You know, they get to hide in a bunker if nukes come. We don't. We don't have bunkers. Okay, the rest of us. These guys have bunkers. They do. They'll be rushed off by security and put into nice fallout shelters with food and nice things. You know, they can maybe wait it out. The rest of the world, you know, if there's a nuclear strike, everything's going to be over in like 30 minutes. If maybe a few hours, but it's going to be over in minutes. In minutes. The Russians have something called dead hand, even if there's a nuclear strike on the Kremlin right now, and they kill Putin, and they kill Shoigu, and they kill Medvedev, they kill everybody, the entire general staff, all the Russian generals, the president, you name it. The Russians still have systems in place to launch nukes at Washington and a whole other bunch of cities. We don't even know where they're pointed because that's secret. And it's over. You don't fix this by war. You got to fix it with diplomacy. And these clowns are saying, "Oh, it's not the right time." No, it's very much the time is very ripe. Here, let me show you Ro Khanna. I think again, I've criticized Ro Khanna a lot. Specifically, this guy's wife has stocks in 7 weapons manufacturers, so she's probably making bank from this war. Let me just play this clip of him on CNN. Take a look.
So this has turned really into a messy own goal on the part of your caucus. What happened?
Well, Bianna, let me just say what my position is, which matters. I have supported every package of giving aid to Ukraine, and I plan to support continuing to arm Ukraine. All the letter said is that we, at the same time that we stand with Ukraine, need to make sure that we're reducing the risk for nuclear war, that we're engaging in talks with the Russians to make sure that the conflict doesn't escalate. We need to support Ukraine with arms, and we need diplomacy. That's common sense.
Well, Congresswoman Jayapal seemed to suggest that this letter was a mistake. It was drafted, signed several months ago, and she's rescinded it. Do you not support that move?
I don't. I think the letter was common sense. I support making sure we arm Ukraine and provide arms to Ukraine and continue to fund it. But I also believe that the president, as he said, we're at a risk of nuclear war. Don't you think our counterparts should be talking to Russia? Of course they should, to make sure that it doesn't escalate. And, you know, my position is similar to what former Joint Chief of Staff Mullen has said, what other senior military leaders have said. Yes, let's stand with Ukraine, but let's also support diplomacy.
So you still support this letter. It was said to have been drafted and signed early this summer. When did you sign it?
Probably in the summer, around June or July. I don't remember the exact date.
Well, the reason that I'm asking is because I looked at the timeline of the war and what was taking place around then. So I just want to read off some of these events. June 27th, Russian missiles target a shopping mall in central Ukraine, killing at least 18 people. On July 17th, President Zelensky says Russia has now fired 3,000 cruise missiles against his country. July 20th, in an interview, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia had departed from its original goal of occupying just two eastern regions, and now saying Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south were also important to take. Subsequently, they have illegally annexed all four. I'm just wondering what you and your fellow caucus members saw in all of this that gave you a sense that Vladimir Putin was serious about coming to the table and discussing a ceasefire, given all of that was going on at the time.
Well, Bianna, first of all, I've been very clear that the war is brutal, it's unprovoked, and the fault is Russia's. And after that, I voted for packages to arm Ukraine.
I mean, honestly, that timeline that you just read out, that was like an average day of U.S. forces in Iraq. Not even a day. That was an average hour, right? Remember, they killed 15,000 civilians just in the invasion, right? And in total, 1 million Iraqis killed. But yeah, okay, they care about shopping malls now. You remember how they would just bomb a wedding in Yemen or Pakistan or a funeral, and they'd say, well, we didn't know, it's collateral damage, right? America always has the excuse of, we didn't know, it was an accident. You know, it's okay for us to kill civilians, it's collateral damage, we're sorry, we had to do it, there was no other way, we didn't know. And everybody else, oh, look at those evil bastards, look at what they're doing, they bombed a shopping mall. You pioneered this shit, man. Don't start pointing fingers now. Let me just tell you something, because there's a statement here from Republicans about, you know, that they're going to get into office with the midterms. This is McCarthy, right? Who is saying this, and they're saying, some of them, not all of them, some of them are saying that if the GOP takes the midterms, that they're going to cut funding to Ukraine. I don't think that's accurate. They didn't say that. They said that they're not going to write a blank check to Ukraine. That doesn't mean they're going to cut funding. They will still fund it. Like I said, Trump was sending them weapons before there was anything. Before, you know, he was doing this years before Russia invaded Ukraine. Okay, so that is really important to understand, because the timeline that they give you is all screwed up. They say it started in February, on February 24th. No, this started several years ago. Several years ago. This has been going on for a long time. But I just want to show you again, this is from Mark Tanako. So he's a Democrat from California. He says only Ukrainians have a right to determine the terms by which the war ends. And that's kind of similar to what others are saying, right? So they're basically responding to the letter by saying, well, this letter is unacceptable. Diplomacy is unacceptable because the Ukrainians are the ones who should be deciding that. Okay? So what I would say to that is, great, wonderful, you know, because for many, many decades they've been saying the Palestinians are responsible for their own fate. They said, well, the Arabs, they refused to accept the 1947 partition plan, right? That the UN adopted. And, you know, the Arabs, they just won't come and sit at the table and talk, right? The Arabs are so violent. Oh, the Arabs are terrorists. That's all you hear. This garbage, this racist, trash, imperialist nonsense from CNN, from the Israelis, from BBC, over and over for decades. And now suddenly it's okay to just press on, to keep the war going, because it's up to Ukrainians to decide when the war ends. Great. So it's up to Palestinians to decide when the war ends. It's up to Syrians to decide when the war ends, okay? There's no diplomacy with Israel. That's not happening. It's never happening, right? Since you want to play this game, right? So they'll pressure the Arabs to do diplomacy with Israel and recognize Israel, who's occupying their territory. But when it comes to Ukraine, it's, hey, screw diplomacy. Press on. Here's $50 billion. Here's $65 billion. Bomb the crap out of the Russians. Keep going. Even if it risks World War III. You see the double standard? You see the double standard? They're really funny, man. They're really funny. And this tucking their tail between their legs and running and basically walking back this letter, it shows you, number one, they are cowards. They are cowards. And number two, they are warmongers. This proves it more than anything else. This proves it more than them sending the weapons. Because they never distanced themselves from the weapons. They didn't vote for it and say, oh, you know what, maybe that wasn't a good idea to send weapons to Ukraine. But they did it with a letter. Oh no, that letter, I shouldn't have signed that letter. Diplomacy is really, it's not in this season. Okay, so, in your own words, you don't want diplomacy with Russia, and you think that war is the answer. Wow, that's really great for the rest of the world. I hope the view looks nice from your bunker when the nukes start falling. Again, here's from the Associated Press. This is Biden, October 7th, just a few weeks ago. Okay, so Biden himself warning. The world is at risk of nuclear Armageddon. That's him saying that, not my words. They're his words. Okay? And you don't need to be a genius to figure that one out anyway, because this is something that's been clear since before I was even born, that since the Cold War, you have mutually assured destruction. If someone fires a nuclear weapon, it's over, because the other side will fire them, and it will just... The Europe, Russia, and North America will be gone in half an hour. Half an hour, that's all it takes, man. And there are many times in the Cold War when the Russians or the Americans thought there were nuclear missiles incoming. The data was not correct on the radar, okay? They have sensors, they have outposts, they have ships, they have all sorts of systems whose sole purpose is early warning detection. Okay, their only purpose is to check what's going on. They have satellites also. Is that a nuclear missile? They can read the heat signature of the missile. They have many, many ways to do this, right? To gather intelligence very quickly and estimate if there's a threat. And even then, with these highly sophisticated systems, they made mistakes. And it's pure coincidence. It's just dumb, blind luck that they decided not to fire nuclear weapons in response, which would have been in response to a false positive. There was no nuke, right? The Russians thought at one moment the Americans had fired nuclear missiles. Turned out they didn't, right? And thank God they didn't fire nuclear missiles in response, because the whole world would have ended over an error, a mistake. It could be from one analyst, some guy sitting at a table. Humans make mistakes, and is that what they're trying to press for here? I'll remind you, when Trump killed Soleimani in Iran, what happened in the days after that? The Iranians shot down a civilian airliner with Ukrainians, right? It wasn't a Ukrainian plane. I think most of the people in it were Iranian, but you still had Ukrainians. And, that shows you that everybody starts to be on edge, because Trump had killed Soleimani, and then he threatened to retaliate on dozens of sites in Iran. So he put the Iranians on edge, and some guy made a mistake and shot down 200 civilians, killed for nothing, because they thought it was a U.S. bomber. So what do you think is going to happen here when the stakes are 50 million times higher? These goddamn fools, man. Goddamn fools. There you go. Democrats, Republicans, they are all warmongers, because these people don't work for you, and they don't work for peace. They work for people who make a living killing others, okay? They work for banks, for corporations, and for arms manufacturers. It's always been that way. Don't expect anything different from these people. They're not progressive. They're fucking neoconservatives. End of story. We got 800 people watching. Please make sure you've hit the like button. And I'm gonna just a second before I move on to the next thing. I'm just gonna read some of your super chats and comments. One moment. We got one here from Larry. Thank you very much, Larry, for the sticker. And I saw on just a second on PayPal there were also some donations. There was one from Anna on CashApp. Anna says thank you for your work. Thank you, Anna. And there was another one here from Chris on CashApp. Thank you, Chris. And we actually just got a new Patreon. This is from Brendan. Thank you, Brendan. I'll play a crab dance for you and then we'll continue, okay? You know, it's a nuclear war crab dance. Let's go.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line. Claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch off.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انتوا كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have 2 number 9s. Number 9 large.
we got him.
I told myself, I know it's not.
I've fallen and I can't get up. Disgusting!
Why you texting? Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. Okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
All right, perfect. That's really great. We also got a super chat here from Sophia. Sophia says, "Marry me." Sorry, I already got 15 wives. I can't do it. All right, let's move on to the next segment. This one is about Iran, and I'm going to show you. This one's hilarious, man. You're going to love this. Okay. So this was on Deutsche Welle. Okay. Professor Marandi, he went on the state-owned broadcaster DW, Deutsche Welle in Germany, and he talked about Iran. And this interview, I mean, man, it made me laugh. He owned the presenter, Tim Sebastian, so hard. It's so satisfying to watch. Okay, I'm going to show you some sections. Let's watch, and then we'll discuss as we go along. Okay, I don't care how long this takes. We're going to have a fun time just discussing and watching. So let's do this, okay?
The violence were provoking the Iranian public. But after a few days, the protests died down, but then we had the rise of very violent riots. And that's exactly what I said.
Well, let's talk about the violence in the riots. The UN Committee on the Rights of the Child has had plenty to say about that. It strongly condemned what it called grave violations of children's rights in Iran. According to reliable reports, it said some children were shot with live ammunition. Others died as a result of beatings. Many families reported that despite grieving for the loss of a child, they were pressured to absolve security forces by declaring their children had committed suicide and making false confessions. That's a pretty sick tactic for your government to employ, isn't it?
No, that's a pretty sick tactic for the Western media and any institutions that are under the influence of the Western media to use.
We're talking about the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. We're talking about a UN committee. We're talking about a UN committee reporting that.
Let's not talk about any UN committee. Let's talk about the UN and how they put the Saudis on a blacklist and removed them 72 hours later. The UN has no credibility here.
But this is the United Nations, good sir. God, that was so hilarious.
This is fake. The claims to I've tweeted about this. The number of police officers that were murdered over the last few weeks at the instigation of media based in your countries. They're roughly 28 or 29. Some of them were shot with guns. Let's not talk about fake news. All these young children being killed all over the place. That's nonsense. Show me the footage of these children being killed.
Why is it nonsense?
Instead of these organizations that are funded by the United States.
Look, I'm sorry, but this is a very valid point. Show me the footage. Why can't someone produce one goddamn video and show me footage? You know, when I see like George Floyd or Jacob Blake, I have evidence. There's video evidence of that stuff happening. And we're supposed to just believe some random crap that there's nothing. It's just blah blah blah. You know, about, oh, this happened in Syria. You know, the secret service came into someone's house and they ate their fucking dog because they wouldn't vote for Bashar al-Assad. And in Syria, you know, and in Iran, they went and beat school children because they wouldn't sing some regime song. Where's the fucking proof? Where is it? Why am I expected to believe news outlets that have a track record of only lying? They just lie the whole time about everything. Unbelievable, literally, no pun intended. let me continue.
Your security forces. You think the people will forgive their leaders for this shocking brutality?
So again, he's saying that they went and beat children in a school because they didn't sing some pro-regime song.
Forces. Amnesty International.
Of course, I'm fine with addressing any.
Amnesty International has reported widespread torture, severe beatings of protesters and onlookers, even sexual violence against women by your security forces. You think the people...
You saw Marandi rolling his eyes? I literally had the same reaction.
Women by your security forces. You think the people will forgive their leaders for this shocking brutality?
No, people will not forgive your leaders for interfering in our internal affairs. And for spreading
someone
misinformation,
else's fault, isn't it?
And
it's always
for
someone
using
else's
Persian
fault.
language media. I'm speaking, Tim. I'm speaking. Don't try to run out the clock. So it's your Persian language media and your troll farms and your governments that are spreading misinformation, both in Persian and in English across the globe. The police officers that were killed in Iran, 28 or 29 police officers, as far as I know, during that period, were killed, people who were policing the streets. If such numbers were killed in your country, what would be the response of your government? But what your Persian language media was doing during this period was...
That's a very good question, man. How many times have you heard someone's dog being shot by the police? Or another human being being shot by the police because they feared for their life, right? I thought he was reaching for a gun. I just had to blast his fucking head off. I'm sorry. Sorry. You know, your dog scared me. I just had to kill them. I'm sorry. This person who's having a mental health crisis, I just had to kill him, man. I didn't know what they were going to do. I'm sorry. Right? And Iran, they're actually killing dozens of police, and then they don't report that at all, right? And it's just, oh, it's the protesters who are the victims. You know, it's a one-sided thing. They did the same thing in Syria, right? They didn't tell you that there were people shooting the security forces during the so-called protests. They didn't tell you that part.
Encouraging people.
But you know, in America, if you shot police in Europe or America, they would fucking send a SWAT team to your house. Your neighborhood would be on fire. I mean, like the double standard again.
Rioters to attack the police, to get revenge, as they called it, on police. They were telling people to make Molotov cocktails. If Ofcom, if any of this was in English.
Ofcom is the it's like the British equivalent of the FCC, right? So it's the media regulator, okay? And it's of course the very unbiased Ofcom, which banned Press TV, which banned RT. You know, anyone who has a bad mouth and refuses to repeat Western propaganda, they have to be banned. Okay, so just listen to Marandi's point now about Ofcom. It's very, very solid.
Your country, what would be the response of your government? But what your Persian language media was doing during this period was encouraging rioters to attack the police, to get revenge, as they called it, on police. They were telling people to make Molotov cocktails. If Ofcom, if any of this was in English, and if it was directed to an English audience, Ofcom would shut down those TV stations within minutes. But in your case, you can use it against Iran because your governments are waging war against the Iranian people. Your governments don't give a damn about human rights. Your governments are the ones who impose maximum pressure on women and children in this country and try to starve them to death, and then use media warfare against the country to create divisions.
Dr. Marandi,
He's absolutely right. Do you think you can go on the BBC and say, yeah, guys, you need to make Molotov cocktails and throw them at the police? They'd arrest you. They wouldn't just take you off the air. They'd arrest you. And, Jeremy Bowen, who's I think he's been a war correspondent for BBC for like 30 years now or something, right? And I remember on Twitter a few months ago, he was posting a guide on where to throw Molotov cocktails on Russian tanks, depending on if it's an APC or a tank, which areas are the most exposed and the best to throw. You think he would post that if it was for a guide for Palestinians on where to throw them at Israeli tanks or Israeli vehicles?
Dr. Marandi, talk of running out the clock. I've given you a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes. Isn't it time to face facts that Iranians, and a lot of
You're interviewing me.
Iranians are...
God, that was so funny. I've given you a couple of minutes. It's 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah, you're interviewing me. Oh, man.
Your government,
this
the head
is
of
so
Iran's
funny.
Semi-official ISPA polling center.
Here, let me go to the next one. Hold on. There was another one over here, like 10 or something. Yeah, here.
Why do you keep putting it out? Why do you play the what about game? What about in Britain? What about Saudi Arabia? Why don't we just stay with Iran? Is that so difficult?
No, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you.
Yeah, and I'm talking about you. We're not here to discuss me or the West.
You work for a government that use chemical weapons.
I don't work for a government.
Oh, yes, we are, because you have no credibility. You do. You work for the German government funds your channel.
You think,
and the German government gas Iranians.
You think Iran...
Do you see this crap? The host, Tim Sebastian, says, I don't work for a government, right? So I don't work for a government. And he's on Deutsche Welle, which is the state-funded broadcaster in Germany. And in the United States, people who work for RT, they had to register RT as a foreign agent in the United States. Right? And if you work for RT and you work for Press TV, where you have more editorial control than if you worked at BBC, and I can attest to that firsthand, you have more editorial control at Press TV and RT than any Western channel, state-funded or otherwise. Right? Then they still say, oh, you're working for that government, right? You're a Putin puppet. You're working for the regime in Iran, for the mullahs, right? But when he's on the German state-funded, oh no, I don't work for anyone, man. I don't work for a government. And BBC, which is, they say, oh no, the BBC is only funded by the taxpayer, but it has an independent editorial board. Fucking bullshit. Over there it's also, oh no, that's not state media. The BBC is very, very unbiased. They're so funny, man. They're so funny.
For a government that use chemical weapons.
I don't work for a government.
Oh, yes, we are, because you have no credibility. You do. You work for the German government funds your channel. And the German government gassed Iranians.
You think Iran
the German government gassed me twice.
Iran has credibility on the international stage? Really? These protests that you said died down have now spread to the cultural elite. They've spread to actors, broadcasters, singers, sporting stars, people who are admired, followed, and have nothing to do with politics.
Tim,
where all these
you're
people
not in our league.
Bought up and incited
Tim,
by the West.
You're not in our league. You're not in our league. Don't run out the clock, Tim. You're not in our league. Your government, the government that funds you, that gives you the opportunities to speak to me, your government gassed me twice. Where were you? You were working at the BBC back then. You were in your 30s when I was gassed twice. Where were you when they were gassing? Don't talk about credibility. You don't have credibility. Your television station doesn't have credibility. Your government doesn't have credibility, and the European Union doesn't have credibility. So don't talk down to Iran. You, like Joseph Borrell, you take care of your garden and we'll live in our jungle.
You're entitled to your views, Dr. Marandi, But even among your own politicians, we're seeing the first signs of open dissent over the government's methods with these demonstrations. Former Speaker of Parliament, Ari Larijani, questioning the use of force, saying the police should not be used to encourage the wearing of the hijab. He's calling for a cultural solution. Iranian society, he said, needs more tolerance. Don't you agree with that?
So you're admitting that in Iran we have open debate. So you're admitting that we have all sorts of voices in Iran. So you're admitting that we have different people who argue with Iran and fight with each other in parliament, outside of parliament, in government, at universities. Yes, that is a part of Iran, and that has always been a part of Iran post-revolution. Not pre-revolution when your guys were in charge, but post-revolution. In fact...
Yep, absolutely. You understand what he said? It's an excellent point, because the host is trying to push this line that the regime is about to fall. There are people in government who are dissenting now and who are opposed to this and that. Yeah, okay, so which one is it? Because one second they say there's no dissent allowed in Iran. Iran is is autocratic, and the mullahs are in charge. There's no democracy. There's no freedom of speech. There's no free press. You're not allowed to speak your mind. And then they say, look at these guys in the government speaking their mind. Is the regime about to fall? It's unbelievable. They always these huge contradictions, right? These huge contradictions. I think there's another one Marandi pointed out. Like, they say the regime is falling, it's growing weak. There have been protests for 6 weeks. It's going to fall any moment. And then at the same time, they say Iran is a growing threat. It's rising, like China rising. These countries are failing and growing at the same time. It's incredible. What a what a paradox. Back in the beginning of the interview, he mentioned a girl who they one second, I'll just play the clip for you. Let me just find the timestamp, because this is very important, okay? Yeah, here we go. Listen to this, okay? Listen to what Marandi says.
Here's an organization that won't be funded by the United States. This last weekend, the Coordinating Council of Teachers in Iran called for a nationwide strike to protest the crackdown on children. That same teachers' organization said plainclothes police attacked the Shahed school in the northwest Ardabil province. 10 pupils were injured badly enough to be hospitalized. Parents of the children were also attacked. You really think that your government going after children and killing unknown numbers of demonstrators is going to stop this unrest?
So you're withdrawing the fake claim
I'm not withdrawing any claim.
Was killed at that school, right?
I'm not withdrawing any claim because I didn't.
So let me show you what they're talking about. This is from The Guardian. This is October 18th. They said an Iranian schoolgirl was beaten to death for refusing to sing a pro-regime anthem. Okay? So her name is Asra Panahi. They're saying she was beaten to death. And now the host, Tim Sebastian, he suddenly... He doesn't say that this girl was killed. He says that children were beaten. Which one is it? I'll show you Marandi's tweet. He called it crude misinformation from The Guardian. No one was beaten to death. This girl shamelessly is being used for anti-Iran propaganda and didn't even go to that school. So the school that they're talking about is... Shahed Girls High School in Ardabil, okay? That's the one. Because the host here, Tim Sebastian, is talking about the same school, right? And Marandi was saying that this girl didn't even go to that school, and she apparently committed suicide because of a family tragedy. Honestly, I don't know what to believe, but I did notice how the media are changing the story. One second they say a particular girl, and they name her, she was killed at the school, and then they say, well, the government came in and beat people. Which one is it? I'll show you another thing, because The Guardian liked doing this kind of rubbish. Do you remember when there was this boy in Syria who they plastered on the front page and said that the Syrian government had bombed his house and he was covered in rubble and blood and everything? You remember that? This was not just The Guardian. It was every Western outlet in English, in German, they say, oh, look at the brutality of the Assad regime. Oh, look at them. Yeah, guess what? Turns out it had nothing to do with that. This is his father, the guy's own father, giving an interview with CGTN, which is Chinese, but English language channel. Okay? And let me read to you what's going on. So the father of a young Syrian boy who captured the world's attention when images of him sitting in an ambulance after an airstrike were widely circulated on the internet exposed the truth about the quote-unquote white helmets had used his son and lied to the world in an exclusive interview. When his blood and dust-covered face made the pain of war more tangible, the 4-year-old boy, Omran, became a symbol of civilian suffering in the city of Aleppo. Omran's father told CGTN that the Syrian opposition had exaggerated his son's injuries. Quote, he only sustained minor injuries. I was injured as well, and it was my blood on his head. I refused to cooperate with the Syrian opposition, so then they said that Omran died via their media. They are not to be trusted. This is what Western media do. You really trust them about Iran? Let me give you another example. Last year when you had protests in Cuba, the United Nations, not just the Western media, which also did this, the UN used this woman's image from Cuba to say that she was protesting against the government. They said she's an anti-communist, an anti-Castro protester. And the UN used her photo on Twitter to say the same thing, and she called them out. She called them out. She went and called them out, and what she's saying here basically translates to, I strongly denounce the use and manipulation of my photograph as a symbol of the protests of criminals and vandals in Cuba, and then she says, long live the revolution. And the UN deleted it. So you can see she's replying to UN Human Rights Commission Twitter account, the official one, okay? So they deleted it. And that's other fake news that they had, right? More fake news. So they'll take a photograph of someone or they'll do a profile on someone who they just use against the Syrian government, against the Cuban government. And that person might even be supportive of the Syrian government or supportive about the Cuban government. Do you see how they lie through their teeth? How can you trust them about what they're saying in Iran? I don't trust these people, man. All they do is lie. They constantly exploit personal tragedies, or they'll go and take like random civilians, use their photographs, and lie about them and make up stories. Just like I showed you with that boy in Aleppo or that woman in Cuba. Why would you trust them now on Iran? It's the same outlets doing the same thing. They're exploiting alleged tragedies and using people in those countries that are targeted for regime change to stir up, to play on your heartstrings, to stir up your emotions. Say, oh my God, that poor girl. Oh my God, they're eating puppies now. They're eating babies. They're throwing babies out of incubators. We've all heard these stories about Iraq, about Cuba. They make up the most ridiculous lies. It's like from a comic book. It's like, what is the most evil thing we can think of? Oh yes, that regime we don't like did it. You really believe them? I don't believe them for 1 second. And Marandi is schooling this guy.
Western media, the claim in the Western media, the claim in the Western media, the filthy claim in the Western media, and the filthy claim in the Persian language media funded by your government, was that a girl was murdered at that school. And then it turned out that that girl didn't even go to that school, and she died because of a family tragedy. But your governments and those Iranian or so-called Iranian organizations funded by your governments in the West make such fake claims so that the global public opinion would turn against Iran, and they make those claims in Iran because you have more Persian language media directed towards Iranians than the Iranian government has. So
that's true. Yep, that's true. I don't know if you guys know this, but you have many Western channels that have, so like the BBC has BBC Persian. To be fair, the BBC has a lot of things. They have BBC World, they have BBC Arabic, etc. But they don't do that because they're multilingual, and passionate about languages. They do that because it's geared towards certain demographics and ones that are particularly resource rich, if you catch my drift. So there's a lot of nasty stuff happening right now. There's a really concerted, targeted effort against Iran. And something just came to mind. You remember in Libya, they said Gaddafi was giving his soldiers Viagra to rape women? Another made-up lie. Another outrageous made-up lie. Just, again, they've come up with the most crazy crap. I bet you they have some office in the CIA where people just come into work at 9 in the morning with their coffee and just start like brainstorming crazy shit to say about countries they don't like. I bet you anything you like. Guaranteed. Let me show you something, though. That this happened today in Iran, and there was a massacre at a mosque. This is here. I'll show you the story from The Guardian, and look at how they frame it. So, gunmen killed at least 15 people at a Shia shrine in Shiraz. Okay, and so you have 15 people killed, and I think it's about 40 people wounded, right? Now, they say that the attackers were described as Takfiri terrorists by Iranian media, which The Guardian says is a label often used by officials in predominantly Shia Muslim Iran to refer to hardline armed Sunni Islamist groups. What does the sentence mean? Why is it a label that's used predominantly by Shia Muslim Iran? No, it's not. That's just how you describe these groups. Takfiri look, I'll explain something. A kafir in Arabic is a non-believer, like an infidel. And takfiri, you can see it has almost the same root, right? So it's a group. They're usually, so we're talking in this case about armed groups like ISIS, who consider other Muslims to be they're not believers enough, right? They're not holy enough. It's like holier than thou, basically. It's that kind of mentality, right? So takfiri groups like ISIS will kill other Muslims because they say those Muslims are not Muslim enough, which is ridiculous, right? And that's not a term that's used mostly by Iran. That's nonsense. You use that term in English even to describe groups like ISIS. That's just what you use because that's a characteristic of those groups. They specifically target other Muslims. This is, you see why this annoys me, because they manipulate the language and the terms to make you think that no, the people who just killed 15 Muslims in a mosque, they don't listen to the Iranian propaganda calling them takfiri. They're different, right? That's just an Iranian term. Like they're trying to denigrate the meaning of it and say that and kind of dismiss it, like, oh, that's just what the Iranians say. No, it's not what the Iranians say. That's what everyone with half a fucking brain cell says when talking about these groups, because that's what they are. And guess what? You know who claimed responsibility? ISIS. This is from Reuters today, October 26th, from 3 hours ago. Islamic State claims responsibility for shrine attack in Iran. And that's exactly what Iran said. Iran was saying these guys are takfiri groups. It was ISIS and their allies in Iran who did this. And of course, the Western media dismiss it and make up all sorts of theories, and then turns out that it's true. So you see what's happening? Like, just before I continue, police arrested 2 of the 3 assailants and we're looking for the 3rd. Okay, so one of them is on the run. And Noor News, which is a media outlet, they said that the gunmen were not Iranian nationals. So we don't know what country they're from, but apparently they're not Iranian. Let me just say something, man. There are several children who are dead. Do you think the Western media are going to cry about those children who we can actually prove were killed? And who did it? ISIS is publicly claiming responsibility. You think Tim Sebastian and all of these anchors on BBC are going to weep now for those Iranian children who you can prove were murdered? They don't care. They don't care about anyone in Iran. Children, women, men, they don't give a crap. They are fine with starving Iranian women and children. They are fine keeping medicine from that country. And this is what they do. They it starts with taking advantage of protests, and then it escalates to armed attacks. And then they send the country into chaos. This is exactly the same game plan they used in Syria. oh, it's just protests, and then you have security forces being killed, and then it goes from that to people being killed in groups by gunmen with blasts, and then it just becomes a war. And ISIS, I don't need to tell you guys, ISIS is a creation of the West. You can look at Al-Qaeda in the Soviet Afghan war. Who was behind that? It's the CIA. And ISIS, when ISIS came into being from the power vacuum that was created by the U.S. invasion in Iraq and the U.S. trying to get rid of the Syrian government, that's an American creation. That's a British creation, which they have funded and armed covertly. Anybody inside Syria who is against the government, they will give them weapons and give them logistical support and intelligence, no matter who they are. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, it does not matter. This is irrelevant to them. So you have a Western creation killing Iranians at a shrine while they're praying, and at the same time, the Western media is in full, is in full action, making up stories about Iran that you just can't trust because they have a track record of doing that in other countries. They are so desperate to cripple Iran because Iran is like holding the whole resistance together. And when I say that, I'm not saying like Iran is directing or telling other countries what to do. That's not true. But right now, Iran is helping the Syrian people get rid of NATO, get rid of the terrorists that the Gulf sent. Iran is helping Hezbollah. Iran is helping Yemen. Iran is even helping Russia. They're sending... Isn't it a coincidence that all this trouble started in Iran as soon as they started sending Russia drones? What a coincidence. What a coincidence. I'll just finish by saying this game plan is a tried and proven method that they have used in many countries before. And when you understand how it works, you can see it when it happens. Again, that doesn't mean there aren't people in Iran who oppose the government. Of course, there are people in Iran who don't like the government, obviously. And like Marandi said, they're even allowed to voice that. If you do that in the UK, you won't get a job. Try getting a job in the British government while criticizing the government. It won't happen. Or the US government. It's not happening. When you go out and protest police brutality in the US, the NYPD will run you over with their squad cars. Guess what? I have videos because I can prove it. I have many videos. So many videos, I can't even count them, of police brutality in the US. Do you have those videos in Iran? I don't. Show them to me. Show them to me. I don't even have a handful, never mind the same amount. So we have double standards and covert ops trying to pursue regime change in Iran because they want Iran's resources, and most importantly, they want to stop Iran from emerging as a power and backing up Russia, backing up Syria, backing up Lebanon and Hezbollah, backing up the Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq, backing up Yemen. This is what they are afraid of. So they're going out at the same time against China. It's calling it the biggest threat now. It's the biggest world threat. Going after Russia, going after Iran, all at the same time. Wake up and look at the truth, man. Smell the coffee. Look at what's happening. I'll leave the link for you so you can watch the full interview with Marandi. I'll just pop it into the chat here quickly. And again, you every time someone protests in the United States, I don't see the foreign ministry in Iran like in full swing saying, it's time for regime change in America. And like I said the other day, the irony is that Iran would have the right to say that because the U.S. Did a coup in Iran in 1953. They've been selling weapons to Iran to make money that way and try to use it as like a regional policeman. They've been attacking Iran since the revolution. Iran has every right to do that and actually legitimately claim self-defense. And I'm not saying they should do regime change in the U.S., but I'm just saying look at the situation, how it's flipped on its head. You have the West pretending to be a victim of election interference when it's the one interfering in their elections and in their politics. I mean, it's just the world is upside down. It's upside down. We got a couple of hold on, let me read these to you. So this is a donation on PayPal. This is from, it's loading, 1 second. This is from Pamal McCoy. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you for supporting the show. And we've got some more donations over here. This is from Shannon. Thank you. And this is from Sherman. Sherman, we wish to thank God for your voice and your bravery, enjoying your show as usual. I appreciate that very much, Sherman. You're very kind. This one is from Shirley Lee. Thank you, Shirley, for the donation. This one is from Phil. Phil says, you're awesome, Richard. Thank you. You're awesome, Phil. I appreciate that very much. And Solomon says, please update your merchandise shop. I told you I got something new coming. So, okay, I will do that. And I appreciate you reminding me. I gotta add some new things that we've made. We've got a donation from Omar. Thank you, Omar. I appreciate that very much. And there's one from Alina as well. Thank you, Alina. You guys are very kind. I think there was some on YouTube which I missed. I'll just go back and read them. Give me a second. Oh, man. Okay, so Christian says, like the babies in incubators lie. Exactly. Who was that girl again who went in front of Congress and said this stuff that they were throwing? Wasn't she the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador or something? I don't remember. But, you know, it's one thing for her to say it. And then, of course, the media to just like, you know, grab it and run with it and report it as a fact. So that was another lie, right? They said that Iraq, you know, that Saddam, they were taking babies and literally throwing them out of incubators. And it's kind of like the lie they had about Cuba, that the communists are eating babies in Cuba. God, this shit is so silly, man. Like I'm even reluctant to talk about it because it's so dumb. It's so cartoonish, you know? It's like it's not even worth dignifying with a response. This one's from Kapapa. Good to see you. Says sips Persian tea. I could use some Persian tea right now. And laughs at Western attempts to demonize Iran while fermenting anti-revolutionary sentiment. That's a very, very good point you made. That the West is trying to ferment anti-revolutionary sentiment in Iran. That is exactly correct. People who don't know any better, who unfortunately consume news from BBC and CNN, they look at what's happening in Iran and they think that's a revolution. They don't understand that the Western media is in full swing, trying to, in overdrive, trying to manufacture stories like they lied about in Syria, like they lied about in Cuba, in Iraq, in Libya, you name it, they've done it. They don't understand that in 1979, you already had the revolution. And what happened? They kicked out the Israelis and gave their embassy to the Palestinians. They kicked out the British oil companies and took back the resources. They kicked out the Americans, who were also responsible for installing the Shah and training the secret Savak police. Iran kicked them out, kicked their butts. And ever since then, they've been demonizing Iran. And what are they trying to do? Crush the revolution from 1979. In Cuba, it's the same thing. Cuba already had its revolution, and ever since Castro, they've been trying to ferment anti-revolutionary sentiment. Syria is the same thing. Syria had way more revolutions. You had guys who were president for like one day, right? But there was a lot of political instability in Syria. That's what happens when the Ottomans colonize you, the French colonize you, and plunder your crap, and But after a while, you had a revolution of Baathism. And what is Baathism? It's socialism, and it's pan-Arabism, and anti-imperialism. All the things that the West doesn't like. So just by virtue of Syria having ties with Russia, being a socialist, being an anti-imperialist country, they hate it. And so they try to crush that revolutionary sentiment as well. You see this pattern everywhere. Gaddafi was also revolutionary for Libya, right? He led a coup, an officer's coup, and what did he do? He transformed the country. He shed the colonial past from the Italians, from all the people that have plundered Libya, and he gave Libya an identity. He had the Green Book. He built the largest man-made irrigation project in the world, where 70% of water comes from in Libya, or used to until NATO bombed it. Also revolutionary. What do? They go and crush that revolution. Any revolution on the planet that goes against Western imperialism, they will try to crush for decades to come. Decades to come. And they will vilify you and make you the enemy. And that's how it is, man. That's how it is. That's what they're trying to do in Iran. You had, if I recall, you had in Iran 10% of the population who participated in the 1979 revolution. And when you think about it, 10% doesn't sound like a lot because it's, out of 100, it's just a fraction. It's 1/10. But historically speaking, in all over the world, when you have a revolution, usually it's nowhere near that number. So the Iranian Revolution from 1979 is actually one of the most successful in history, and one of the most inclusive in history, where you actually had a whole bunch of people who were driving, who were pushing that and actually supporting it. You can't say the same about a lot of countries because they didn't have anywhere near that number of 10%. It's just an interesting fun fact. It's food for thought. Moses, please talk about the attack in Iran that just happened. I don't know if you were tuned in like 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago, but I just did. And it's clear that it's ISIS. And honestly, I wasn't sure if it's MEK or not, because MEK are another terrorist group. They're not they don't believe in the same things as ISIS, but the MEK is Mujahideen al-Khalq, which is like a group that is compared to a cult sometimes. The point is that they are supported by the West. They have a conference every year. Mike Pompeo was at their conference. So I don't really need to say anymore, right? But they are very, very, very anti-Iran. They want to get in there, do regime change, and have their own government. And they're basically, they moved before they were in Iraq when Saddam was bombing Iran with support of the West. They were based in Iraq for a while, then in Paris, and I think now they're in Albania. So when you look at the Israelis killing Iranian nuclear scientists, they killed a bunch of them, right? They killed 4 between 2010 and 2012. The guys who helped them are oftentimes MEK, right? Because they are themselves Iranian. It's easier for them to blend in and take on these roles and move inside of the country than it is for an Israeli. So they'll oftentimes work with the Mossad, with the Israeli intelligence service, to do sabotage, assassination, and so on. Amir says, I wouldn't doubt the West to some involvement in the unrest, but us Iranians in Iran are fed up with 43 years of mullah and Basiji corruption. Enough is enough. Look, man, I hear you. It's like in Syria. You're going to have a ton of Syrians who don't like the government. But it's wrong for the West to get involved, because then, why is it important to have popular support? Because then you can look at it and say, that's what the people want, right? So if the people want it, then it must be true, then it must be right. How can you know what the people want if it's foreign intelligence services getting, into the mix? That's the problem. If it was really just Iranians doing that, good for them. It's their business. But the problem is, every time someone goes to protest in Syria, you have hawks that jump in on it and hijack it and then turn it into something else. And the same in Iran. It's the same in all of these countries. They don't allow any natural movements, any popular movements, to just run their course. They don't let that happen. They have to go and exploit it. And that is what pisses me off. In the US, when you have people protesting, the foreign ministries in Russia and Syria and Iran aren't jumping on these protests to hijack them and turn them into different movements. You see what I'm saying? They just let people express themselves and mobilize on their own. They don't interfere. But the West, always interferes, and they always make sure they interfere. That's the problem. Let me just tell you one last thing about the MEK. I think you'll find this very interesting. I'm trying to find something with, where was this? With the American ambassador. I think he was in Albania. Let me see 1 second. Because we were talking about MEK. So just give me 1 sec. Yeah, look at this. Let me show you something, okay? So Yuri Kim is the American ambassador in Albania. Okay? And I'm not sure if I need to double check this, but I thought that wasn't she meeting with the MEK last month? I'm trying to find the link again. Not last month. It must have been in August then. I'll find it. Don't quote me on this. I need to double check it again. But you don't need an official transcript of the meeting to know that they're working together. That it's just, Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, they publicly go and speak at their conference. So what more do you need? What more evidence do you need? Anyway, I wanted to play a crab dance for Helia. I hope I said your name correctly. Thank you for supporting the show, and I appreciate that very much. Let's go.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line, claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch off.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انت كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
China.
And you ain't black.
There's always the macro, and then there's the micro.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
You talking to me?
Ladies and gentlemen,
I'll have 2 number 9s. Number 9 large.
we got him.
I told myself, I know it's not.
I've fallen and I can't get up.
Disgusting! Why you texting? Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
All right. Thank you guys very much for supporting the show. I got one more thing to do with you, but before I continue, if you're able to, please consider supporting the show. I think this is outdated. We're at 854 now, right? So we are on our way to hitting 900 subscribers on Patreon. All in all, if you're able to, please consider supporting the show. It can be as little as $2 a month or £1 a month, anything you like, any currency or any amount you like, and you can stop anytime and increase it or lower it anytime. So I'd be very grateful for that. And you can also donate on PayPal if you want, or CashApp, Venmo, whatever it is. I'll put the QR code on the screen while I'm getting the next thing ready. And again, thank you for your comments. Janice just sent a donation on YouTube. And they say Ohio. They're tuning in from Ohio. Awesome. So give me 1 second. I'm getting the next I'm getting the next thing ready, all right? Give me a moment over here. Yeah, let me show you what I was saying with the MEK. It was not the American ambassador, it was the Israeli ambassador. Okay? So just very quickly. It's not the American ambassador, it was the Israeli ambassador to Albania who met with the MEK in when is this? On October 11th. Okay, so this month actually. Right? Very interesting. The Israeli ambassador to Albania, Galit Peleg, met with Rajavi. She's the leader of the group, yeah? Maryam Rajavi. During the former's trip to southern Albania, during the meeting, the two discussed how to develop cooperation between the Israeli occupation and the MEK. Yeah, when they say cooperation, they're talking about, like I said, blowing up nuclear sites or killing Iranian scientists. That's how they cooperate. And this is what I love about El Mayadeen, because they don't say Israel, they say the Israeli occupation, because that's what it is, right? On CNN and all these channels, they suddenly know what war crimes are, and they suddenly know how to criticize Russia for occupying Ukraine, but not Israel. And I just want to point this out because this is, again, the timing of it is interesting, right? Why is the head of the MEK publicly meeting with the Israeli ambassador to Albania while you have all these protests going on in Iran, right? If they're really just protests and there's no foreign influence whatsoever. It's a bit fishy, isn't it? Food for thought. Let me move on to the next thing. I just want to talk about something quickly. This is... Okay, so we have a couple of... I'm just going to pick a random article and talk about this with you guys, okay? Give me a second. The story is the same. It's not really the point, but I wonder if there's a speech of it, because, we have a new government in the UK. So, there's one every week, really, but I'm trying to find his speech. He's the foreign secretary. Okay, give me a second.
Authorities in
is this the one?
Past about gay football fans.
Okay, so let's go through this, all right? Let me go through this with you guys. So, the UK has a new prime minister, Rishi Sunak. I almost said Liz Truss for a second, right? Every other week there's a new prime minister. The new foreign secretary in Rishi's cabinet, in Sunak's cabinet, is James Cleverly. And this is what he had to say about the World Cup being in Qatar next month, or rather in December, right? Because it's too hot to play in the summer. So for the first time, I've never seen this before, they moved the Football World Cup to winter, okay? And there was this whole scandal about Qatar because I'll get to that in a second. Let me just play the video, what he said, okay, about gay football fans going to Qatar. Listen to what he said.
I have spoken to the Qatari authorities in the past about gay football fans going to watch the World Cup and how they will treat our fans and international fans. And they want to make sure that football fans are safe, secure, and enjoy themselves. And they know that means that they are going to have to make some compromises in terms of what is, an Islamic country. With a very different set of cultural norms to our own. One of the things I would say to the football fans is, please do be respectful of the host nation. They are trying to ensure that people can be themselves and enjoy the football. And I think with a little bit of flex and compromise at both ends, it can be a safe, secure, and exciting World Cup.
Okay, so they're basically they're fuming because they're mad at him for basically telling people don't be gay when you go to the World Cup, right? That's what he's basically saying. And I just wanted to point out a bit of the hypocrisy because these Gulf countries, okay, whether it's Saudi Arabia, it's the UAE, whether it's Qatar, they're best friends with the West. Okay, you guys know that Saudi Arabia sells oil in dollars exclusively, so that this props up the U.S. currency, and that's what we call the petrodollar. Qatar, everybody knows that they basically bought their way into hosting the World Cup because usually it's a draw, but they bought their way into that because they have all this money from oil, and more importantly, they're also using slave labor. Right, so there are many workers who've come there from Bangladesh, from many countries they take their passports and they're not allowed to go home, and some of them have even died. And FIFA knows this. FIFA's the governing body for international football, right? And they know this, and they don't care because it's corrupt. And so, like, I'm seeing more outrage about his statement than about the slave labor. And people that were literally used as slaves to build these stadiums that are going to be used in 2 months. But the other thing I want to say is, like, right now you have all this outrage about Iran because they have a morality police, right? And they're trying to portray Iran as being like, it's a bunch of cavemen who don't respect women, when there are actually more women in universities in Iran than men, right? But you look at the hypocrisy. Saudi Arabia also has morality police. Do you even know that? Did you even know that, let alone hear someone complain about it on CNN? Are there any sanctions on Saudi Arabia's morality police? Huh? Women couldn't even drive in Saudi Arabia until a few years ago. And now the West, they suddenly give a crap about women in Iran. Yeah, sure. They have no problem depriving women, and specifically mothers in Iran, of medicine, of food. That's what sanctions do. And so, with Qatar, you can see, once again, this double standard. Like, there are things they'll criticize Iran for, which most of the time are not even true. And when Saudi Arabia or one of the other Gulf countries do the same thing that they're criticizing Iran for, or even worse, or even more, they don't say a word about it. Look at the double standard, at the corruption. They have no problem with these Gulf countries, right? The Khalij, as they're called. The Arab kingdoms in the Persian Gulf, the Khalij. They don't have any problem because they need them. They need those guys to give them oil and to prop up the dollar. And right now it's interesting because the Saudis have said, screw you, we're not going to pump more oil out. We're actually going to reduce it. You know what's so funny to me? I can't believe this, man. Look what happened. OPEC Plus, they cut oil production a few weeks ago. I did a video on this and why it impacts the world economy, why it's so important. They basically gave Biden a slap in the face. And it turns out the Saudis wanted, they wanted to cut oil production by 2 million. The Russians only asked for 1 million. Can you imagine? The Russians, who are in OPEC Plus, said, let's just calm down with producing oil by 1 million barrels, and therefore we can raise the prices a bit, right? Which is more revenue. And the Saudis said, no, we're not going to cut it by 2 million. And that surprised the Russians. The Russians weren't even expecting that. And that's also something really, really interesting, I find. Like, the Saudis, I don't know what's going on, man. It could be, maybe tomorrow morning they'll be best friends again with the Americans. But for now, this is unprecedented. And they really look like they're sick of the US. And they've said they want to join the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about this scandal with James Cleverly, because it just happened a few hours ago. He literally just became the foreign minister. Rishi Sunak became prime minister just 2 days ago, and so he put Cleverly in his cabinet. And they're kind of grilling him right now in the media and saying that it's rude of him to tell gay football fans basically to hide that they're gay when they're in Qatar. I'll say one thing. Do you know, British football fans, gay or otherwise, are viewed as the most violent and ignorant in the world. And there are many, many times when there's a cup taking place or competition, and they just banned European, even in European countries, they've banned British football fans from coming in because they're so violent. It's hooliganism. I remember there was one time where they banned, no, not one time. It's this in Qatar. Let me show you this. Just for the same cup, they've banned, I think, 1,300 people from going there. This is the Home Office, by the way. They've even done that. The Home Office has banned 1,300 violent and abusive fans from even traveling to the World Cup in Qatar. So it's so scandalous, even without Cleverly's comments about being gay or not. Like, British fans in general are unfortunately very, very unwelcome in other countries, and you could say rightly so, given the past behavior. But again, I just wanted to point this out, because usually you never hear any criticism about the Gulf states in terms of how they treat women, how they treat gay people. It's not brought up because they're friends, right, of the West. With Iran, they bring it up every day. They never make you forget, right? So it just shows you again how when neoliberals, they do this identity politics shit, they only do it when it suits them. Okay, you'll rarely ever see something like this where they're not even really criticizing Qatar, they're criticizing the foreign minister. You see, They're not even criticizing Qatar. It's the foreign minister cleverly who they're after. It's so funny. They don't dare open their mouths about those Gulf countries because they need them so desperately. Without them, they are screwed. The West has no oil or gas. You have to understand that right now, with Russia being banned in Europe from December 5th onwards, no oil, no gas. They're looking for alternative sources. Qatar is one of them. Qatar can export LNG, which is liquefied natural gas, and of course, people will pay through the nose for LNG. And that's if Europe can build the terminals in time, which you can't. They take years to build. But they wouldn't dare take the World Cup away from Qatar, even though it's corrupt and they use slaves to build the stadiums. And even though they don't respect gay people, right? And conform to their neoliberal values, they're not going to open their mouths. They need that gas very badly. So, again, I'm pointing out the very interesting international relations between Gulf states and the West. Very, very important to understand this. Brighton's thoughts. Thank you for the donation. Brighton says, how can I contact you to have you on the show? Well, I'll post my email in the chat. It's I have a new one now. It's RichieMedhurst@gmail.com. So RICHI Medhurst@gmail.com. And I appreciate the invitation. It's very kind of you. And thank you for the donation. I'm checking here if there's any others. I sometimes I'll stop the show and I see someone sent something a minute ago and I missed it. So we have one from Anita on PayPal. Thank you for that. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to everyone who signed up on Patreon or even just subscribed. If you're new here and you just subscribed, I appreciate that too. So thank you very much. I'll just leave the links below. This is the PayPal, the Cash App, the Venmo. You just have to open the camera on your phone and scan the QR code and it will send you on the link. And I don't know how many we're on Patreon right now, but we should be getting there. And we have a donation on Rockfin from Diane. Thank you very much, Diane, for the tip. That you're very kind, and I hope I didn't miss any others. Give me a second. I'm just trying to look on the website on Patreon. 1 second. So right now we are at 854. Yeah, I was correct. So 854, and we're trying to get to 900. So just really, 46 of you. If 46 people sign up, we'll hit the goal, and I'd be very grateful. I'll leave the link below, and thank you, Claudia, for updating the numbers thing. That's about it. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you tuning in, and most important of all, please make sure you have the bell icon ticked or whatever. It gives you notifications when I go live. And if you don't want that, you can do it on Telegram or by email. So that when I go live, you get a notification every time. Because YouTube doesn't tell you always, right? It's hit and miss. It's hit and miss. Marvin says, saw Noura Erakat on Katie Halper's show. Please get her. Okay, hold on. Let me write this down. And I appreciate the tip. Thank you for that. Thank you, Sophia, for the very generous donation. I appreciate the what is that? The heart eyes emoji. Thanks for that. Yeah. So no, I'm still thinking about the foreign minister commenting on. Like, isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Like, they're more angry at him than how Qatar treats gay people. Again, it shows you, like, they're so afraid of criticizing that country because they need it, especially now, right? And it shows you how they always put money over everything else. Like, this identity politics is just bullshit, man. They don't even believe it themselves. It's all about money. It's all about money. It's all about power. That's it. That's all that counts. If it suits them, they'll just look the other way. I never, ever, ever heard Joe Biden or anyone commenting about how women are treated in Saudi Arabia. Not once. Maybe there's like some obscure clip out there, but it's not a nightly news story. They wouldn't dare. You know why? Because the fucking lights in the CNN studio would go off. They wouldn't even be able to get to work. The United States, only since recently, produces more fuel. Is basically the number one producer of oil. But that doesn't mean that they're self-sufficient. You can still be the number one producer and have a deficit in consumption. Okay, so even though the U.S. can produce more oil than anyone, it consumes so much, it still has to buy extra oil from Saudi Arabia and from other countries. Just to give you an idea. Brighton says, just had Scott on my show. You helped me discover him. He's great. He's great. I wanted to go through his book also because we talked about it on the show, but it's been a minute since I picked it up to finish it, and it's very good. The one about disarmament in the time of perestroika. So yeah, Scott is very good. All right, guys, that's it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it very much. And remember just to comment or like or share the video. Share the video, open people's eyes, whatever subject it is. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Ma'asalame and bye-bye. In the last couple of months, you've seen them sanction Russia, and what has that done? It's driven the value of the ruble up, the euro and the dollar are down. Russia has made even more money than it was making before because the Europeans are still buying the oil. The rest of the world is still buying the oil, and the price of oil and the price of gas have gone up. So even if Russia is selling less oil and less gas, the fact that the price has gone up means that Russia is making more, there's more revenue, okay? So they've come up with a new plan. This is their new brilliant plan. The crude cap applying from December 5th and the refined products to follow from February 5th, 2023. If you want to go and move Russian oil, you need to get a ship, and you need to get that ship and the cargo insured. The idea is that they will refuse to move your Russian oil unless you bought it at a price per barrel that is below this threshold. I can already tell you one thing, the Chinese are never going to go along with this price cap. A price cap on Russian oil without the price of oil skyrocketing. It's just not happening, man. The EU now wants to replace Russian gas with Israeli gas, right? There's nothing better than some stolen Lebanese gas. And the Israelis are trying their best to block the nuclear deal because, you know, if sanctions are lifted on Iran, Iran is free to sell its oil and gas. Remember, Iran has the biggest gas reserves in the world after Russia. And what do the Israelis do? They straight up just send a giant ship to start extracting the gas. I mean, this thing is a behemoth. You know, Nasrallah, who is the Secretary General of Hezbollah, he threatened them that if they extract any gas before they solve the maritime border dispute, there's going to be a huge response. If Israel messes with Lebanon and starts extracting gas before this issue has been resolved, they're going to strike the Israeli gas rigs. And no company is going to want to come anywhere near that because it's a war zone then. Let me show you this opinion piece I found in The Guardian. The ruble is soaring and Putin is stronger than ever. Our sanctions have backfired. Wow, you don't say. Took you 5 months to realize that? Western sanctions against Russia are the most ill-conceived and counterproductive policy in recent international history. The reality of sanctions on Russia is that they invite retaliation. Putin is free to freeze Europe this winter. He has slashed supply from major pipelines such as Nord Stream 1 by up to 80%. The chief beneficiary is none other than Russia, whose energy exports to Asia have soared, driving its balance of payments into unprecedented surplus. Man, seriously, did I not say exactly all of this months ago? Perhaps after all, we should stick to war. I don't agree with everything in this article, but the premise that sanctions have failed, absolutely. I mean, this was clear from the beginning, man. They're attacking India again for buying Russian oil. Now, again, think of how the United States and the West are. They thought, okay, we're going to sanction Russia, and then Russia's economy is going to be destroyed. And now Russia is moving more amounts of oil towards the east than it did before, and India is buying this up at a discount. The Ukrainian foreign minister, look what he says to India. He says that every barrel of Russian oil delivered to India has quote-unquote Ukrainian blood on it. They're shipping Russian oil to the United States via India. They just send it to India, and then in India they mix it in with something else, right? So chemically speaking, it's not exactly 100% the same as it came in from Russia. Western European countries and the United States want to go lecture India for buying the same oil as them. The West still consuming Russian oil, and then they have the nerve to lecture India for doing the same. Europe needs a gas supplier. Israel, I mean, no matter what it wants to do, it's not just about the money. Let me explain this, man, because the Israelis, for them, it's not that they need the money desperately like Lebanon. They want people to legitimize them, to validate them. They want to have the prestige of being, oh, we're an official energy supplier to the European Union. Remember, when you are supplying resources that are so crucial, like oil, like gas, you know, this gives you power. It is power. And they want to kneecap Iran in every way, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whatever it is, whether it's foreign investments. Remember how many companies lost billions that they invested in Iran? There is a serious will to cooperate with Iran, but the Israelis hate that. They want to be the number one in the region. Gennady Gatilov, who is Russia's permanent representative to the United Nations in Geneva, that just means that he's an ambassador. He said that the world has changed and the UN will never be the same as it was before. These UN votes, remember, there were multiple resolutions to condemn Russia, to ask Russia to end the invasion and so on. India that didn't do it, China that didn't do it, and only South Africa condemning Russia. That's very huge. They want to deal with Russia. Doesn't mean they like the war, but they're not going to go and like cancel Russia. Although overwhelmingly those countries at the UN did vote to condemn Russia, the ones that didn't have very powerful economies or vast resources, or both. Of course, that includes Iran as well, Iraq. They all refuse to condemn Russia. I think I understand what he's saying, that, oh, the UN will never be the same. I get the feeling it's the same with the European Western society, the economy. This is all going to go down the drain. A lot of people are going to get hurt, which is very unfortunate. In the last couple of months, you've seen them sanction Russia, and what has that done? It's driven the value of the ruble up. The euro and the dollar are down. Russia has made even more money than it was making before because the Europeans are still buying the oil. The rest of the world is still buying the oil, and the price of oil and the price of gas have gone up. So even if Russia's selling less oil and less gas, the fact that the price has gone up means that Russia's making more, there's more revenue, okay? So they've come up with a new plan. This is their new brilliant plan. The crude cap applying from December 5th and the refined products to follow from February 5th, 2023. If you want to go and move Russian oil, you need to get a ship, and you need to get that ship and the cargo insured. The idea is that they will refuse to move your Russian oil unless you bought it at a price per barrel that is below this threshold. I can already tell you one thing: the Chinese are never going to go along with this price cap. A price cap on Russian oil without the price of oil skyrocketing. It's just not happening, man. The EU now wants to replace Russian gas with Israeli gas, right? There's nothing better than some stolen Lebanese gas. And the Israelis are trying their best to block the nuclear deal because, you know, if sanctions are lifted on Iran, Iran is free to sell its oil and gas.